In this guide, we're going to be going over all the different enemies and bosses in Resident Evil 7 Biohazard. So unlike a lot of other games in the series, which have you blasted away at zombies and punching big lizard people in the face, Resident Evil 7 is a very different kind of survival horror experience, and all of its enemies and bosses are much more tied in with the events of its twisted storyline centered around the Baker estate, which is basically a cocktail of various popular horror movies all blended together, with the Resident Evil formula sitting somewhere in the middle. And as far as these games go, I guess you could say this one breaks the mold. It does this figuratively and literally, with the Baker estate being mouldier than a cheese factory in Chernobyl, as a mysterious black fungus has decided to take over the residence, spreading around faster than a controversial post by Elon Musk. But this isn't just any ordinary mold, like the kind you'd find in a student's cupboard. It's actually a hyper-evolved species generated by a bioweapon. And just to remind us that we are still playing a Resident Evil game, this fungus can attach to dead bodies and basically recycle them, by morphing their remains into clumsy piranha-mouthed monsters. Sort of like symbiotes, only ones that look like they've had a bit too much tequila. These creepy mold men make up the vast majority of the game's enemies, with the most common type being a standard slasher variant, and with a pair of dagger-like claws. No prizes for guessing what these guys are going to do. You obviously don't want to let them get too close, having those Wolverine hands and a face like a bear trap. And although shooting the limbs and body might seem like an okay way to slow them down a bit, you really want to be aiming for that spiky face to blow the monster's head off. A pretty basic enemy, but at least it's a nice change from shooting bloody zombies. Aside from these normal ones, if you can really call them normal, there's a few other moulded types that you'll want to keep an eye out for too, with one of those being a bladed variant, which is literally armed with its own organic weapon, growing out of its right limb. Anybody here remember the Prototype games? Well, it's probably no surprise that these things hit like a bloody truck, and so you'll want to make even more of an effort to try and keep the bladed ones at bay, with them not only lashing out with deadlier strikes, but also having a beefier health pool to keep them going for a little bit longer. If one's becoming a bit too tough to handle, you could always just slink off into another room and let that bugger melt into oblivion. Where did he go? Nobody knows. Good old video game logic. For the most part, these moulded creatures are generally a bit slow and dopey. But there is one type that's bound to get your heart rate going a bit faster than the others, and that's the one that scurries around on all fours like a demonic spider bastard. These crawlers are a hell of a lot faster and more agile than the other types, having long gangly limbs and a much slimmer body, generally adding to their overall creep factor, as they scramble towards you, head first, in a pretty unsettling sort of way. Their unnatural movements can make them trickier to hit, which isn't made any easier by them constantly leaping over with that gaping jaw trying to take a chomp at you. But thankfully, being a smaller monster also means that they're a weaker one too, so what they gain in their speed and mobility, they lose in their ability to take a bullet to the face. Can't be good at everything. And then of course, some of the moulded are just fat. Could be down to them skipping too many cardio days, but it's probably more likely because they're stuffed to the gills with nasty puke, which these chunky monsters are going to projectile vomit all over the room like a 19-year-old at a house party. You obviously don't want to get puked on, because it'll not only make your clothes stink, but it's also going to corrode your skin and blur your vision, with that stomach bile being extremely acidic, much more so than normal. You'll either have to dodge the streams, keep some good distance, or jump behind some cover before the creature starts blowing chunks. It's got some pretty good range, and it can withstand quite a lot of damage, but thankfully it also happens to be a bit of a slowpoke, giving you a bit of time to read its attacks and get to a safer position. Just be aware of it doing a sneaky pop after it does eventually go down though. Okay, so that's enough chatting about gloopy looking mole people. Let's get down to the nitty gritty of some of the game's main antagonists. The reason why Ethan's gone to the estate in the first place is to find his missing girlfriend Mia. Well, that's actually a surprisingly easy thing to do, done right at the very start of the game. And the whole nightmare of what's to come probably could have been avoided if Mia didn't keep turning into a friggin' Evil Dead character. You find her in a farmhouse very early on, acting a bit weird and confused. Not the normal reaction of a damsel in distress. It doesn't take long until she flips the switch and suddenly changes into a crazy knife-swinging maniac. She's been possessed by the bioweapon's spooky power, and because that bioweapon really doesn't want you buggering up its plans by escaping, it'll force Mia to try and kill you, with the poor girl doing the whole Gollum Schmeagol thing as she tries to battle the malevolence taking hold. Along with having the urge to stab the living crap out of you, she's also been gifted superhuman strength and regenerative abilities due to the mold's exposure. And so retaliating with an axe is the only option you've really got here. It does the job fine enough, but now you're probably going to have to reinstall Tinder. Okay, well, Mia isn't dead, because that'd be the end of our journey and we'd be spending the rest of it in a depressing car ride back to Texas wondering how long it's going to take for the cops to show up. It's not all good news though, because she's back to her murderous shenanigans, and just to make things even more interesting, she's also found a chainsaw too. What a predicament. Now most of the time, getting your hand lopped off would normally lead to the game over screen. Instead, you're left to just casually wander around holding a bloody stump. Leah's still on the prowl though, and she'll chase you around the attic with that chainsaw buzzing away, insistent on finishing you off. Gotta keep your distance and keep the bullets flying, as she'll only be able to withstand getting shot in the head so many times, eventually falling down, thus letting you get captured by the one and only Jack Baker. It's time to meet the family, a crazy group of sadistic killers who've had the shitty misfortune of being selected by the bioweapon to corrupt, control and become part of its master plan, with Jack Baker being the father, sort of acting as the head honcho of these psychos, and the first member that's going to put you through the ringer. After escaping a bit of an awkward family dinner, Jack's going to chase you around the house with a big shovel. He's not the fastest guy in the world, but that doesn't make him any less intimidating, especially with your running speed being hilariously pathetic. Another good horror movie trope. With no way of defending yourself, the only thing you can do is slowly jog away, and try not to get absolutely battered while you find your way out of this cat and mouse situation. If you're not careful, you'll get a shovel to the face, or worse, you might just end up losing a leg. Though thankfully you could just splash a bit of magic water on that to reattach it. Don't ask. Jack's going to be a thorn in your side for quite a while, popping up to torment you in several different places. And although you'll eventually get access to weapons and ways to slow him down, Jack's also going to keep upgrading himself too, by getting a hold of even gnarlier things to whack you over the head with. He's also going to keep showing off his regenerative abilities too, by surviving otherwise fatal injuries, getting set on fire and shot in the head, only to come back later on acting like nothing really happened, to kick off another episode of Tom and Jerry. By venturing into the basement, things are going to get very grim very fast. The whole area has been designed as a makeshift monster factory, with the Baker's victims just hanging around in body bags waiting to be turned into the moulded. It's here where you'll be lured into a trap, using the one puzzle piece needed to escape, only for Jack to pop out of nowhere and kick you down into an arena that looks like the sort of place you'd film one of the Saw movies. Speaking of saws, you'll now be able to grab a nearby chainsaw to use against Jack in the fight, though there's a bit of a catch, as he's also going to be able to upgrade his weapon too, getting access to a custom-made death tool that sort of looks like a giant pair of motorized scissors. It's business as usual, only now you'll need to try and avoid being chopped in half, jumping in every now and then to give Jack a bit of a tickle with that chainsaw blade. To make life slightly easier, you can kick the hanging bodies into Jack to cause him to stumble, letting you rush in with an attack or gain a bit of distance to heal up with that magic water. Though as far as fights go, this one gets pretty violent, and causing enough damage will force Jack to drop down to his knees and mutate into a messed up blob of flesh, leaving him wide open to getting pulverized by your weapons. This will happen a few times, giving you some nice opportunities to rip Jack a new one, and the last time that happens will cause his body to explode into a pile of orange mush, with Jack now being reduced to a pair of wandering legs. Resident Evil games are well known for having bosses that keep getting back up from getting their asses kicked, and they're also pretty obsessed with giving us big nasty mutants covered in eyeballs. It makes them a tad creepier, and it also gives us something squishy to shoot. Because Jack was torn in half, this triggered a wild mutation. The mold in his DNA got a little bit too excited, and it turned him into this messed up thing that you can see on the screen right now. He's obviously grown a bit since we last saw him, and having a bunch of new limbs, faces and all sorts of weird mold growth sprouting out from his body gives him new ways to try and attack as you dash around the boathouse. It's a pretty simple fight with two simple objectives: poke the eyes out and try not to get bitch slapped. Being such a bulky beast, Jack's not exactly very fast, though he can still flatten you if you're not careful, so it's best to stay on the move and use both floors to try and make yourself trickier to hit. Once all the eyes have been popped, Jack's going to destroy the upper floor, rapidly grow his head back, and then do his best to slam you into the sludgy water. Just give that regrown eye a good blasting, and you'll put him back on the floor again. It turns out that shooting the eyes isn't going to cut it this time, as after grabbing us yet again, we can see that another one's already starting to grow in the place that we just peppered with buckshot. Jabbing the big guy with one of the serums is the only option you've really got here, causing the mold in Jack's body to calcify, turning him rock solid, and looking a bit like one of those white dog turds that you used to see about 30 years ago. Too young to remember those? Ask your parents, it'll change your life. So that's Jack out of the way, but before we move over to his demented wife, we should probably check out some of the creepy crawly minions that she likes to cook up. The old house is definitely one of the eerier locations in the game. It's dark, it's dilapidated, and it's also teeming with man-eating bugs. A bunch of blobby mold-covered hives have popped up all around the partly destroyed building, generating swarms of angry flies, which chase you around the premises. There's also giant variants of these guys buzzing around, which sort of act like annoying wasps at a family barbecue. Colonies of hungry spiders guard some of the doorways and lockers containing useful items, which isn't very convenient. And then of course there's centipedes. Lots and lots of centipedes. So prepare to get a few stings as you navigate around this bug-filled house of horrors, at least until you manage to get hold of an improvised flamethrower, and get a bit of payback by turning those little buggers into smouldering piles of ash. Some might call them enemies, others might call them creepy hazards. But the reason why these vicious bugs are here in the first place is all because of Marguerite Baker. Now, just like her husband Jack, Marguerite is also infected by the fungus, turning her into an evil cannibalistic nutjob too. But aside from having similar motives and characteristics, she's also acquired the not-so-special gift of being able to give birth to the cast of Bug's life. All of those creepy crawlies in the old house are essentially her babies, made from the mold in her body, which imitates insects in the local area. Probably why the spiders only have 6 legs. Marguerite will generally wander around the old house looking for you, and unsurprisingly you'll want to stay out of her way. Otherwise she'll unleash a cloud of pesky flies to come hunting you down. She will eventually catch up with you though, and trap you into a pit, forcing you to deal with the crazy woman, along with all of her annoying pets, in the only way that you know how. This causes Marguerite to fall down too, but before you can blow her head off with that shotgun, she'll be saved by a random pool of sludgy liquid, forcing you to climb up before it does too much damage to yourself. Because you just so happen to need that bloody lantern that she was holding, you'll need to return to that pit soon after to retrieve it. But lo and behold, Marguerite's mutated into a creepy bug demon. And although it doesn't seem like a very sensible thing to do, you'll need to grow a pair of balls and follow her down that dark claustrophobic tunnel that she's just gone scurrying down. Unfortunately for you, Marguerite's escaped into another part of the old house, which also happens to be a really good place for her to conduct ambushes. And because she's now mutated into a disturbing monster with stretched out limbs and a swollen bug hive growing out of her crotch, she's now got new abilities and new ways to make your soul leave your body. I think out of all the mutations in the entire series, this one's definitely up there as one of the freakiest. Apart from looking like a sleep paralysis demon, Marguerite moves around in a very unsettling way, choosing to climb around on the walls and ceilings, often skittering off to try and evade sightlines. You know she's nearby, but you're not entirely sure where. Sort of like noticing a big house spider running under your bed. It can make the situation a lot more tense. We already know about her insect conjuring skills, and she's going to use these tricks here too. But you'll need to keep focusing fire on that nasty hive that she's got bulging out of her, while trying to avoid her pounce attacks, and generally doing your best to keep a bit of distance. Although Marguerite can regenerate damaged tissue, those powers of hers aren't quite as strong as Jack's, and so enough damage dealt will eventually cause the mold in her system to calcify, only for her to crumble into pieces and leave behind that lantern that you were looking for. There's already been an absolute buttload of horror tropes in the game up until this point, so let's just throw a creepy little girl into the mix too for good measure. Turns out that the nasty bioweapon in this game isn't a tyrant, a hunter, or some sort of freak with 50 arms growing out of its head. It's actually a genetically modified human called Eveline. She's the source of all the weirdness, from the mold infestation to the Baker family turning into murderous savages, with Eveline being the first E-type bioweapon using mind control to corrupt and manipulate her targets. Though unlike most of the other bioorganic weapons cooked up in labs, this one's an actual human with real feelings and desires, and all she really wants is to be in a nice big happy family, kinda like Vin Diesel in Fast and Furious. It all sounds kinda wholesome, but the problem is most of this family comprises of murdered tourists and hikers that have now turned into an army of spiky-faced fungus people, with the Bakers being used as tools to keep feeding Eveline's unhealthy obsession with abducting randomers. Not only can she use them all to influence infected people, but she can also use it to kill some of them too. So as far as bioweapons go, this E-type is one of the most powerful and one of the most dangerous, being able to eliminate enemies without the need for any combat. So how the bloody hell did such a deadly bioweapon end up with the Bakers? Well, while being transported on a ship to another lab, she decided to escape and throw a bit of a tantrum, running around vomiting fungus everywhere, which infected the crew and ultimately led to the ship getting destroyed in a violent storm. Only for Eveline, Mia, and the wreckage to wash up in the bayou not too far away from the Baker estate. The two of them get rescued by Jack and brought into the house to rest up. Though it doesn't take too long before Eveline starts getting up to her mouldy mischief, forcing herself into the family where she'll stay for the next 3 years. Fast forwards to present day, and you'll actually see Eveline hiding in plain sight. The creepy granny that keeps randomly appearing like you're in some sort of retirement home prop hunt, that's her. No longer being given medication to stabilise her rapid aging, with the little girl you see later on simply just being an illusion of her prior self, 3 years earlier. Towards the very end of the game, you'll craft an E-necrotoxin designed to kill Eveline, but she obviously doesn't want you to do that. She can't directly control or kill you, but she can induce hallucinations and push you away using the Force. Jabbing her in the neck will get rid of the influence that she has over you, wiping away the illusion, thus revealing her true form, aka the creepy old woman. But this doesn't have the desired effect you wanted, as although it does cause Eveline to melt away like she's just opened up the Ark of the Covenant, the puddle of mould she turns into manages to merge with the rest of the mould growing all around the house, allowing Eveline to bounce back from death in a much bigger, more monstrous form. She's very pissed off at this point and feels completely betrayed by everyone, but you've got to stop that big monster face from getting too close by blasting it away with all the firepower you've got. Keep doing that and she'll take the fight outside, bursting out from the old house, venting her frustration by smashing you into oblivion. Once again, just keep shooting away at that spooky moon face, and you'll eventually get the opportunity to pick up a gun loaded up with ramrods, which is basically special ammo that destroys the fungus and prevents regeneration. Just keep shooting Eveline in the face with these bad boys, and you'll be able to put a stop to her rampage once and for all, calcifying the big creature, thus turning her into a big crusty pile of meringue. In a sad sort of way, pretty much everyone in the game is a victim. Ethan, the Bakers, Eveline, that poor bastard Clancy. Okay, Lucas was a diabolical sadist, and technically Mia wasn't exactly an angel either. But the real enemy of the game still ties back into the good old Resident Evil roots, of a big corporation causing lots of pain and suffering to a bunch of innocent people, and not giving two shits about it. So if you enjoyed this guide and want to see more, then I've got some good news for you, as you'll be able to see all of the enemies and bosses from Resident Evil 7's DLC content in the video up on the screen right now. Big shout out to all my members for supporting the channel, and of course, thanks for watching.